So I guess at this point of the day, we've talked to you a lot about the risks. We've talked about problems. We've talked about a lot of the issues. And then with the regulatory side, and Deneen brought in some of all the training that is available to you. But we're going to spend the afternoon now talking about what you can do. Like what are the steps that can be taken for the specific sides of things, the technical, we won't get into the managerial so much, but we will get into the financial, but hopefully some of the technical information and the water risk stuff will bring you to be able to manage it a little bit better. So you've also probably, if you're an operator, and certainly the government people, you're probably realizing that you have a lot of responsibility. Like, it is a very big deal to be taking care of these water systems. Your responsibility is quite high, actually, and so we're hoping these tools and all the things we bring to you this afternoon will help you address those parts. So Walkerton's been brought up several times, and Deneen mentioned the big report that came out of it. So one of the big lessons that came out of that report is that these water systems need improved resilience. So, and how to do that was with multiple barriers of protection. So in Newfoundland, that's called the Multi-Barrier Strategic Action Plan. So I'm going to talk to you now about source water protection, which is the first #1 barrier towards keeping your water system safe. And it was mentioned a little bit before. If you have a good source and you have a secure source, you're that much further ahead towards having good, clean, safe water for your community. Yeah, so I sort of already mentioned that part. The protection for source water protection is also for groundwater and surface water. And then every source has its own potential set of risks and hazards. And the things we want you to get out of this presentation is to get to know your source, prevent contamination at your source, identify the risks, and also to have an understanding of your water quality results. Now, at this point, we usually ask, are you a groundwater or surface water source? Now, I know most of you aren't either of those, but the few communities who are here, are you on groundwater or surface water? You're both surface water, are you? Oh, St. Mary's, I was there last week, yeah. I guess out of those numbers fall pretty close to what's there. So out of the 477 public water supplies, 299 of them are surface water and 178 are groundwater. So this is a picture of a watershed. And now a watershed is just an area of where all the water is flowing towards a surface water source. So on this figure here, you can see the divide, the topographic divide between the high points on that ridge there. So on either side of the ridge, the water is flowing downwards. And then here it's coming to the small rivers, and then the bigger one and through the dam, and eventually in Newfoundland it's always going to the ocean. And then part of the water is being infiltrated into groundwater. This figure is also trying to show some of the issues that can be in your watershed area, like farms, industrial uses, and wildlife, that sort of thing. So I think Rich spent quite a bit of time, it's pretty clear with surface water that, if it looks clean, there's potential that it isn't clean because of all the pathogens and issues that can occur. But I think you gather that from this morning. This figure is just trying to show a cross-section of this water balance. So you have the water coming, you have evaporation, precipitation, and then it flowing into groundwater. But I kind of wanted to get across the idea of that basin. You have the surface water basin that's holding your source of water, but there's water coming in, and there's also water going out that's not just going to your water supply. It's going out to the rest of the environment. So it's important to know how much water is leaving your source, like how much are you taking, but it's also important to have an understanding of what the climate is doing. How much precipitation are you getting? What's the evaporation effects? Like how much water is actually available there for you to take for your supply. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time, quite a bit of time actually, on groundwater sources because it's not as visible, and this is also my background, so I prefer to spend time on that. It is often preferable over surface water because it can be a more secure source, but as Rich talked about, in Walkerton that was a groundwater source. A lot of the sources here, the groundwater sources here in Newfoundland, they're old wells that have issues, and then you need to know what is happening underground. So in this figure you see 2 wells into a shallow and deep aquifer, and this one that's going into the shallow one, so you're getting precipitation that happens in this recharge area, and then it's just flowing down in the water to the water table, and it's sitting, and this well is collecting from that shallow aquifer system. But that shallow aquifer system also has a fuel tank close by, a barn that potentially has cattle or some kind of livestock in there, the septic tank at that house, and we don't know what's in everything else. So there could be all these risks that are just happening to that shallow aquifer system. Now, and ideally what you would like is to have this clay aquitard overlying a deep aquifer system. So the clay aquitard is collecting a lot of the contaminants, and you'll have a much safer source in that deep system. In Newfoundland that doesn't happen very often because we don't have very many sand aquifers, and B, they're mostly in bedrock. And so this next slide just shows what happened, the difference between sand and gravel aquifers, the porous media, and a fractured rock side. So there's a little happy face there that goes through the porous media. So porous media has a lot more opportunity. There's a lot more surface area, so there's place for the chemicals or I should say minerals and bacteria to adsorb onto the surface of these things. So that's how they get filtered out. And then in rock, you just have a single fracture that the thing can generally just flow right through, so there's not as much chance for attenuation as in other systems. Another thing that's important to consider in groundwater is the groundwater flow direction. Just like that watershed area, the groundwater generally flows not downhill but down gradient, but it still flows from high head to low head. So it's one of the things you need to consider and delineate once you're looking at your groundwater source. Where is that water coming from? How far afield? And is there any issues in that field? And then one of the most important barriers with your groundwater source is having a properly drilled well. This is a figure from Water Resources. So this is what a regulated well looks like. It has a 20-foot or 6-meter casing. The casing is grouted into the rock. So when they drill it with an 8-inch bit and put the casing in, and then cement it in all the sides, so there's no way that water can get in through that part on the side and let anything that's on the surface get through the side of your casing. That little mound here, mounded earth, is also there to direct the water away from your casing so that it won't flow down the side of your casing and bring anything that's there. You also have to have your wellhead at least 24 inches, 2 feet up to your knee above surface. A vermin-proof cap on top. You don't want anything to be able to get inside your well. So this one is here to show you some of the potential land use issues that can be in both groundwater and surface water sources. This is a photo from Ontario, but this is a water source that flows directly into a river that is used as a water source in Ontario. And with all, Rich is talking about Walkerton and the cattle farming there, it's fairly obvious that that is a potential issue for your water supply. Another one is gas stations, oil, and a very Newfoundland specific one is saltwater intrusion that can happen in wells. And the saltwater will sort of migrate under the ground surface. There's density issues that are happening there. So if that well starts pumping at too fast a rate, it can start drawing in the salt water, and then you can't really use that well anymore. You can use it as a you can use it to draw the water into that well, but you'd have to put other groundwater wells behind it, so they would start pulling clean water out. This GIF or this animation is just to show you what happens when you pump a well. It's drawing from very far afield, and as you draw over time, it's going deeper and going further and further afield. That's that cone of depression that happens in a groundwater source. And then we've talked a little bit throughout the day about water quality data. It's all available online for every community. You can pull it off the website. And one of the sheets you have here, the one that has all the codes on it, on the bottom is the websites. And the one that says link to Department of Municipal Affairs and Environment page, or I don't think, it's not quite on that page, but it's on the one before it. Some of the data is there as well, but it's very easily accessible, and you can use Denine's training for the portal as well. So after we talk about all the things that can happen in your watershed area or your groundwater supply area, the next question is your water supply protected? Now, Denine talked about this a little bit within her program, but this is going to be one of your big lines of defense of keeping your water source safe. So of those 477 public water supply sources, there are 258 protected surface water sources, and only 60 of the groundwater sources are protected. So what those protection areas look like, this is a shot from the portal, the Water Resources portal, And each of these green hashed areas are protected water supply areas for the community. The intake is shown just here, and everything around there is protected under the Water Resources Act. So this document contains all the information about protecting the water supply area. So as Deneen mentioned, it's protected under Section 39 of the Water Resources Act. Every community is strongly encouraged to begin the process of protection. And I think you do that through Annette over here. And so all the steps in the designation process are in that document, available online. And then, just a second here. So once you have your water supply protected, you can use this sheet. It's available in the back corner there. Nice laminated checklist for you to go around your water supply area to begin a monitoring and inspection program. So this is a great resource. There's a bunch of these back there, and we'll look at some more of those as the day goes on. Things that you can have in the field. So it tells you what to bring: a field book, digital camera, measuring tape. You should do it at least every 6 months. Have a look at what's happening in your water supply area. So if you don't have one of these, pick it up at the back. So what should you be looking for? Hopefully it's pretty obvious to you if something like this happens. Like, there's a lot more minor issues that could happen, but this is a really, bad example of what can happen in your water supply area. So in 2016, a truck was driven right into the pond, and this water supply serves about 1,500 people. A hospital, school, that's a big community for Newfoundland, and they were put on a non-consumption order instantly. They had to get the truck out of there somehow, so the first thing that had to happen was to winch the truck out. It was 1 kilometer into the water supply. So it had to be brought to the edge of the surface water source. And then they had to wait till the water froze over to be able to drive it out of the supply. So there were quite a few things that were lucky here. The fuel tank did not leak. And I suppose that the person was safe. But they had to engage a consultant to have this pulled out of there later on. It cost a lot of money. It was big resources, and the owner was charged under the Water Resources Act. So, this is an extreme example, but anything like any fuel oil, anything like that in your watershed area is going to affect your water supply. So that's, something you should be looking for. And I did mention you should have a vermin-proof cap on your wells. This is a large vermin, Newfoundland vermin, but smaller examples of what can end up in groundwater wells are, in Ontario, snakes end up in there a lot, but just anything you do not want in your drinking water. Earwigs are a gross one. Okay, in your package is a document called Boil Water Advisory Assessment Tool. So we're going to spend a little bit of time identifying your source water. So on page 3, I know many of you don't have your own source water, but you could do St. John's if you wanted. or the community that you're from. So when we go visit the communities, part of this is a mentorship program. We'll go through this to try and identify risks. So if you can name your water supply and then go through each question and answer yes and no, and we'll have a little chat about it later. So just to try and figure out if there are any risks in your water supply area that you weren't super aware of before this. So we'll just give you 5 minutes or so to do that. Sort of highlight the issues that can and will and may happen in your water supply area. So I just have a few more slides to talk about how to make it better. And I guess the biggest message we're trying to get across all day is that you can seek help from Municipal Affairs and Environment, from Service NL, from the public health people. this nice fellow here. So they can help you find the resources to make things better in your source water protection area. So another thing you can do is promote community involvement. Get the people in your community to help out with it. Have people be engaged to watch what's happening in your water supply area. And also post the watershed maps in public areas so people know this is not an area that you can be on your quads and your skidoos and your all that stuff is prohibited in that area. And then you can, again, seek out expertise from the people in this room. At the back of the room, there is a flyer that looks like that little one. And that has even more information about protecting your water supply, your surface water source. So it's a handy document. I think also Annette had this one made up, as well as all of these documents you can take for your community. They're all about protected water supply areas, and they can be given out to the public and used in the community. So one of the things you can check and make sure how many people, well, there aren't that many of you, but do you guys have gauges to know how much water is in your pond? No. It's not a common one, but a staff gauge is a very simple, easy tool, and if you record every day, every week, some period of time what your water level's at, you'll have a better understanding of, you can understand if your pipes are leaking, if you're using too much water, what's going on in your system. Another one we've seen quite a bit is they mentioned about the bog holes. If you have a poor source, so there's a lot of sediment on the bottom and you get a lot of turbidity issues. A simple fix can be moving the intake up and adding a coarse screen to it that can help aid that issue. Another one that is a maintenance issue that doesn't always get done is cleaning the screens. There's certain times a year there's a lot more turbidity and organics and issues coming into the water source, so that they should be cleaned once a week. Not that many communities do that, but it could be done even more if you have really significant issues with organics or turbidity. I thought Dorothy would like this well picture. This is probably a well beyond its lifespan. It also has all the issues, if not more. There's probably a pretty good chance there's water flowing alongside the casing bringing all sorts of contaminants into that water supply. So if you do need a new groundwater supply, which just like a roof, as was mentioned, you probably need a new groundwater supply every 25 years or so. You can use the geology of the province. People like me can help you find water supply. But it is not an easy thing to do in the island of Newfoundland, because most of those colors on that map, and particularly on the Avalon, we have very low yields, low well yields, so it's not always the best solution for this area.